Israel appears to be close to a deal with the Hamas terrorist organization that would see a few of our hostages released in return for a large number of terrorists released from Israeli prisons. I have my thoughts on this, but I won't share them with you. I will just tell you the facts and let you come to your own conclusions. We will start by looking at who is slated to be released first and what will the IDF's continued deployment in the Gaza Strip will look like. The basic outline of the deal is as follows. Over 42 days, 33 hostages who appeared on a list delivered to Hamas will be released. Only once it becomes known how many of them are alive will the list of terrorists be released from Israeli prison be published. The IDF is also prepared to halt humanitarian aid to the Gaza Strip immediately if Hamas attempts to backtrack on the deal. And meanwhile, a clause in the deal that was kept hidden from the Israeli public now comes to light. Hamas demanded the body of their leader, Yair Sinwar, as part of the exchange, and will tell you what Israel is demanding in return. President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump, commented on the significant progress in talks for a hostage release deal and ceasefire in the Gaza Strip on Monday evening. He claimed that from what he understands, there was a handshake, and he warned that if it doesn't happen, there will be a lot of trouble. In Israel, there is hope that the deal will be signed as early as today or tomorrow, but first, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will bring the proposal to his cabinet for governmental approval. And elsewhere, Iranian officials are reportedly in a panic as this hostage deal is another major blow to their regional plans. However, another part of the regional plans is to use the Houthis in Yemen to harass Israel, and that is still going on. There were 3 launches at Israel from Yemen in the last 24 hours, waking my family and I in the middle of the night. These attacks are a serious matter, but so far they haven't managed to inflict serious damage or casualties on Israel. The world is watching Israel conduct this war, defending against missiles and drone attacks, retaliating with brilliant air and ground maneuvers, and winning against seemingly overwhelming odds. This campaign is rewriting all the manuals on modern warfare and showing Western air, land, and even sea forces how to use all the tools in the toolbox. Meanwhile, Iran is also demonstrating some new tools. This week, they revealed an army of drones that they believe will protect their nuclear sites from attack. The drones, which were a surprise to the West, reportedly have advanced capabilities and a range of thousands of kilometers. Closer to home, Israelis had some very sad news on Monday as 5 IDF soldiers were killed and 8 others seriously wounded when the building that they were searching in Bet Hanun in the Gaza Strip collapsed on top of them after booby traps were set off, destroying the main support pillars. This is just the latest incident prompting questions about how Hamas is still able to function and carry out these deadly ambushes against the IDF. The current leader of Hamas is Mohammed Sinwar, the brother of late Hamas leader Yair Sinwar, and he is leading a guerrilla army that includes the surviving members of the organization that have been fighting Israel since this war began. But it also includes thousands of young men and teenagers who have joined the ranks even in the last few months. Many of them join up because they have no other way of feeding themselves and their families since Hamas has stolen all of the humanitarian aid that's been sent into the Gaza Strip for its own use. We've got a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report about what's happening in Israel on day 465 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, and the Shiite militias in Iraq, All of them are taking their orders from Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, the head of the axis of evil in the Middle East. A moment before we begin, I want to invite you to press the subscribe button so that you stay aligned with the truth in real time. And beyond that, we here at TBN Israel are working hard to bring you the truth of what's happening in Israel. So every financial contribution helps us. You can go to tbnisrael.com/give or click the donate button on YouTube so that every dollar of yours will be invested in telling the truth about what's going on in Israel. Now, let's get into the news. Over the last day, there has been some dramatic developments on the path to a deal for the release of some of the Israeli hostages that are kept in the Gaza Strip. The emerging framework includes a ceasefire, release of hostages, and changes in the IDF's deployment in Gaza. There is a lot going on, and it's possible that things can still change drastically, but here's what we know so far. The ceasefire in the first stage will last 42 days. On day 16, discussions on implementing the agreement's second stage will begin. According to the framework that has been publicly announced during the first stage, 33 hostages will be released. The list of hostages to be released that Israel gave Hamas at the beginning of the negotiations included 34 hostages, but Yosef El-Ziadna, whose body was recovered by the IDF soldiers in the Gaza Strip last week, was removed. According to Israeli estimates, most of the hostages on the list are alive, but there's no absolute certainty. Israel effectively gave up its demands for a list of living hostages and is moving forward with the deal without it. The hostages to be released in the first round mostly include women, including female soldiers. The children of the Bibas family are also on the list, as well as several adults over 50 and those defined as wounded or ill. The release is to continue throughout the first stage over a span of 42 days. Although negotiations are continuing under heavy censorship, a Hamas source said yesterday there are still obstacles concerning the commitment to end the war, the buffer zone where the IDF will remain during the ceasefire, and the Philadelphia corridor. A source close to the negotiations told the Reuters news agency that a few final details remain to be worked out, but provided no specifics. In any case, Israel stated last night that the goal remains to announce an agreement as early as today. Once the deal is finalized, it will be brought before the Security Cabinet and the government for approval. After that, the Prime Minister's office will publish the list of prisoners to be released, and the public will be given time to submit appeals to the Supreme Court. The law stipulates that the public is given at least 48 hours before implementation. And according to a source involved in the negotiations, a round of talks will take place in Doha, Qatar, on Tuesday with the heads of the Israeli negotiations teams, including Mossad Director Dedi Barnea and Shin Bet Chief Ronen Bar. Also expected to participate is U.S. President-elect Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, President Joe Biden's envoy, Brett McGurk, and the Prime Minister of Qatar, Mohammed El-Thani. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will meet with both families of hostages who support the deal and families who oppose it. All of this leaves us with another question about what will happen to the hostages that are not released in this first stage. According to the data in Israel, in the Gaza Strip, there are 36 hostages defined as deceased. If in this deal 33 hostages Israel defines as alive are released, 29 who are believed to still be alive will remain in Hamas captivity in the Gaza Strip. The agreement is divided into 3 stages, but senior officials have said it may be shortened to 2. Over the second stage, the rest of the hostages are expected to be freed, possibly together with the bodies of the deceased. Now comes the part that is causing a lot of confusion and anger in Israel. Because in return for releasing these hostages, Hamas is demanding that Israel release hundreds of terrorists who are now sitting in Israeli jails after having been convicted of terrible crimes, including murder. The overall number of terrorists set to be released in the first stage is supposed to be about 1,300. However, since Israel does not know exactly who among the hostages in the first stage are alive, it's uncertain that all 1,300 terrorists will be freed. The numbers may change depending on how many of the hostages to be released in the first stage are alive. Additionally, Israel will require that the murderer terrorists be exiled and not allowed to return to Judea and Samaria, so they'll be sent to the Gaza Strip, Qatar, or Turkey. In the first stage, in any event, no Nukhba terrorists captured in the Gaza Strip during this current war will be released. According to a report in a Saudi news portal, which has not been confirmed by any other source, Hamas also demanded the return of the body of terror organization's leader, Yair Sinwar. An Israeli official responded that that's not going to happen, period. Regarding the IDF's continued deployment in the Gaza Strip, the plan is as follows. The IDF will remain on the Philadelphia corridor in the first stage, withdrawing to a buffer zone gradually to ensure Hamas's compliance with the deal. The IDF is also expected to leave the Netzarim area, which effectively divides the strip between north and south, thus allowing displaced Gazan residents to return to northern Gaza, subject to security checks. Sources knowledgeable about the negotiations told the Saudi news portal Al-Hadat that Hamas recently delivered its final response with no comments on the draft agreement. The talks in Qatar continue to progress slowly and cautiously, with the deal's outline clear. Israel has moved a great distance and is prepared to do a lot to get to a deal. According to these sources, ultimately, as always, it depends on Hamas. However, Israel is not confirming the Reuters report that a final draft has been conveyed to the parties while waiting for Hamas's response. An Israeli official told us, "We must wait patiently. It will take several days to know for sure if there is a deal." And elsewhere, United States President-elect Donald Trump addressed the advanced talks for a hostage release deal and ceasefire, claiming that as he understands it, there was a handshake, and he warned that if it doesn't happen, there will be a lot of trouble. In an interview with Newsmax, Trump said, "They'll finish it. I understand there was a handshake, and they'll finish it. Maybe it will happen by the end of the week, but it's gonna happen." White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said at the Bloomberg event in Washington that there is mounting pressure on Hamas to say yes to a hostage deal and a ceasefire in Gaza, adding that Israel wants the deal, adding that there is a real chance we can get a deal this week before the end of President Biden's term. We're waiting for Hamas's answer. For what it's worth, Hamas also issued a statement saying, "We are close to the date of freedom for our prisoners." However, Israel is taking no chances and is drafting a fallback plan in case Hamas backs out and tries to play games like in previous rounds. In a meeting held last week, Major General Ghassan Aliyan, the coordinator of government activities in the territories, revealed that the army is preparing for the possibility of halting or reducing humanitarian aid to Gaza. Several possible scenarios were presented at the meeting, from gradually reducing the entry of aid to a total halt, a step that would require approval from the political echelon. Sources familiar with the details stress that the system is ready to respond swiftly to any decision made, clearly outlining the operational and humanitarian implications for the decision makers. Here at TBN Israel, we'll continue to report and keep you posted about every development for the release of our hostages held in the cruel clutches of Hamas in Gaza. We will keep praying for the quick and safe return, as well as the safety of our soldiers. Speaking of our soldiers, let's move on to other topics and theaters involving Israel, but first, I want to once again take a moment to invite you to find the subscribe button and click on it so that you never miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. Now shifting our focus to the southern front, another ballistic missile was launched from Yemen towards Israel overnight between Monday and Tuesday, triggering sirens along Israel's center. The IDF spokesperson's unit reported that the missile was apparently intercepted and that the incident concluded after several interception attempts. This marks the third launch from Yemen within 24 hours following the interception of a UAV and another missile fired by the Houthis on Monday. Shifting our focus to the northern front, there was some good news out of Lebanon this week. Following the election of the new president in Lebanon, a new prime minister has also been appointed. The continuing progress being made towards forming a functioning government in Beirut means that Israel's northern neighbor will have more ability to stand up to Iran and Hezbollah. However, there's a lot of work to be done before we get to that point, and this includes work that must be done by the IDF to further degrade Hezbollah's military capabilities. Early Monday morning, Israeli Air Force fighter jets attacked Hezbollah targets in Lebanon, including north of the Litani River. And according to the IDF spokesperson's unit, smuggling routes on the Syria-Lebanon border were also targeted. What this means is that despite the collapse of the Assad regime in Syria, Hezbollah continues to smuggle weapons into Lebanon from Syria with Iranian assistance, and perhaps also with some factions of the rebels seeking to rearm and rebuild. Israel is trying to prevent this, but experience shows that it is very difficult to completely halt such smuggling. The IDF added that the strikes were carried out with intelligence guidance and after Israel's complaints about violations were relayed to the oversight mechanism but were not addressed. Here at TBN Israel, we will keep you updated on every development in Lebanon going forward. So please continue spreading the truth, share our videos on YouTube, and follow us on social media. In between video updates, you can visit our news website, which covers what's happening in Israel with in-depth articles and updates. The website is tbnisrael.com, and we hope to see you there soon. Before we move on to the tragedy in Gaza and the progress of our heroic soldiers, the military activities that they are doing in the Gaza Strip, let's briefly touch on the Iranian front. Against the backdrop of mounting tension between Iran and Israel and the United States, and ahead of Donald Trump's inauguration, Iran announced on Monday morning the addition of 1,000 new strategic drones to its forces. The announcement came at a conclusion of a large-scale military exercise by Iran's military forces. Iranian military sources said that these new drones, designed for special missions, are expected to significantly improve the army's intelligence, the surveillance, and reconnaissance capabilities, along with strengthening its operational abilities against distant targets. Security officials in Israel are closely monitoring the developments, and experts assess that the timing of Iran's announcement just days before Trump assumes office on January 20th is not coincidental and is intended to send a message of deterrence. Now, let's move on to developments in the Gaza Strip. Monday was a particularly painful day for Israel. Even as negotiations for a hostage release deal are being finalized, it was clear for publication that 5 Nahal reconnaissance unit soldiers were killed by the collapse of a building in Bet Hanun in northern Gaza. 8 other soldiers were seriously wounded in this incident. This brings to 10 the number of soldiers who have been killed in action while operating in the northern Gaza Strip just in the past week. The conditions there are incredibly difficult and the enemy is very well equipped and determined. This is not a ragged bunch of poorly trained, poorly equipped, worn-out fighters. This is a high-tech enemy which uses cameras and remotely operated improvised explosive devices to ambush IDF soldiers. The terrorists have a sophisticated network of underground tunnels which they hide inside, monitoring these cameras and waiting until the IDF is within range of their booby traps before activating them. The IDF never even sees the terrorists that attack them and cannot return fire against them. This is the 21st century version of guerrilla warfare, and conventional armies around the world are watching it to learn how they can fight in similar conditions in the future. One task that never ends in this kind of warfare is finding and dismantling mines and booby traps. This is very dangerous work that is done by the combat engineers. However, despite their use of these tactics, Hamas is slowly being eroded in the northern Gaza Strip. They have nowhere to run as the IDF is encircling them on one side in Bet Lahia and on the other side in Jabalia. Speaking more broadly, Hamas has taken extremely painful blows, and most of its battalion and company commanders have been eliminated, along with the senior leadership, including their overall commander, who orchestrated the entire massacre in the Gaza envelope on October 7, 2023, Yair Sinwar. Despite all of this, in recent weeks, Hamas still managed to continue challenging the IDF, firing rockets day after day at the Gaza border region and even inflicting many painful losses on Israel. How is it that a battered terrorist organization, enclosed in a territory so tightly sealed, still manages to rearm with powerful bombs capable of blowing up a tank and killing the soldiers inside it? How does it manage to rebuild and recruit more terrorists in large numbers despite its dire condition? The answers to these questions is made up of several factors. As far as we know, the weapon smuggling routes into the Gaza Strip from Egypt are apparently sealed off fairly effectively. Hamas has found other sources of explosives, including unexploded bombs dropped on Hamas targets by the Israeli aircrafts. Taking the explosives out of these unexploded bombs is very dangerous, and many Hamas terrorists have been blown up in the process of trying. But those who succeed bring the extracted explosives to workshops where they are formed into improvised explosive devices to use against the IDF troops. Additionally, while Hamas may have taken a blow with the elimination of Sinwar, the Wall Street Journal says that Yair Sinwar's brother, Mohammed Sinwar, took command of the organization and is regrettably running it quite successfully. One of their main sources of revenue comes from stealing shipments of humanitarian aid that is sent into the Strip for the use of the civilian population. Hamas takes this aid, keeps the best parts for their own fighters, and sells the rest to the general population at massively inflated prices. They use the money for these activities to pay salaries to their fighters and otherwise dominate life in the Strip. Any young man who wants to feed himself and his family in Gaza understands that the only way to do so is by joining Hamas. There is no other economic activity to take advantage of in the Gaza Strip. Anyone who decides to enlist in Hamas not only gets regular meals, but also receives assistance in feeding his family, as well as medical support for them. The new Hamas squads formed from these young recruits may not be as well trained or skilled as the terrorist groups that they had at the start of the war, but they're skilled enough to lay explosive charges, fire RPGs at the IDF forces, and even execute accurate sniper fire. None of these require lengthy training. However, it should be noted that Mohammed Sinwar's appointment is not entirely accepted by Hamas's external leadership, which wanted to form a collective leadership council after Yair Sinwar was eliminated. But in Hamas, what counts is whoever is strong on the ground, and in the Gaza Strip, control lies with the individual close to Yair Sinwar and Mohammed Sinwar. Unlike his brother, Mohammed Sinwar did not spend long years in Israeli prisons, which makes it harder for Israeli security forces to form a clear profile of his personality. Some call him the Shadow because he mostly operates behind the scenes and rarely appears in public. Here at TBN Israel, we'll keep reporting on every development in the fight against this horrific terrorist organization and on the ideology that it represents. I want to conclude today's report by paying final respects to some heroes who fell defending the state of Israel. The soldiers killed in the building collapse in Bet Hanun in the Gaza Strip this week have been named as Captain Yair Yaakov Shushan, Staff Sergeant Yahav Hadar, Staff Sergeant Guy Carmiel, Staff Sergeant Yoav Pfeffer, and Staff Sergeant Aviel Weissman. We'll continue praying for their families, and please spread the word and follow us. Most importantly, keep praying. Pray for the well-being of the IDF soldiers that are fighting in the Gaza Strip, in Lebanon, in Syria, or in Judea and Samaria. Pray for the swift return of our hostages in Gaza who are held by those vile Hamas terrorists, and so that you can focus your prayer on a face. Here is one individual who was kidnapped on October 7th and remains in Hamas captivity. Idan Alexander, born in Tel Aviv and raised in Tenafly, New Jersey, is a dual Israeli-American citizen. After graduating from high school in 2022, he moved to Israel to serve as a lone soldier in the IDF. On October 7, 2023, he was kidnapped into the Gaza Strip, managing to send a text to his mother before communication was lost. In November 2024, Hamas released a propaganda video featuring Idan, marking the first sign of life since his abduction. In the video, he appeared gaunt and delivered messages to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and United States President-elect Donald Trump, urging efforts for his release. Known for his dedication and courage, Idan's decision to serve in the IDF reflects his commitment to both his Israeli heritage and the defense of Israel. His family continues to appeal to the international community for support in securing his freedom. So guys, please keep praying for the peace of Israel, and most importantly, never forget to pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And remember, we're serving an awesome God, and He will win this war for all of us.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.